Hi everybody and welcome to my studio. My name is Lonna and I am an acrylic decorative artist, and I just want to say thank you for stopping by, because if you've come to my YouTube channel, you've come to paint with acrylics today. So let me show you what we're going to be painting. We're going to be painting this really super fun soda shop sign. Isn't it fabulous? Looks delicious. Like you could just grab it right off of there and eat it. I wanted to make it look like an old antique sign, so it's got a little bit of rust and wear going on around it. The background is actually scrapbooking paper, which you know how I love to use scrapbooking paper for my background. And I think you're going to really enjoy painting this one. So if you're ready, let's turn around to my paint table and let's get started. Okay, I've got my surface that I'm going to be painting. Now you're going to want to apply a coat of multi-purpose sealer onto your surface and let it dry. I think I had already applied a coat of it on here at a previous time, because I started the other side for another background. So I flipped it over to go to this side. We want to put some paper on here. We're going to decoupage paper on here. Now I've done this on several of my projects in the past. The paper I'm going to be using I got from Hobby Lobby. It's the Paper Studio brand, and that's the one the Hobby Lobby sells. This is what I'm using, but you can use any paper you want. You could actually just paint your background white, put some tape lines, and then paint some red stripes on here. You could use a checkerboard background, polka dots, music notes, anything that will kind of remind you of the 50s. I have this Coca-Cola one, which is kind of cool, and then this one is a pretty versatile one, and they have it all the time now at Hobby Lobby. But I'm using this red one here. And all of these papers, except for this Coke one, came from Hobby Lobby. I've had this one for a few years, so I'm not really sure where it came from, but I'm sure that you could probably find some maybe on Amazon. Just Google Coca-Cola scrapbooking papers and see if one comes up, if that's the look you're going for. So I have taken a piece of this paper and I laid this on the back of it and traced around it, and I cut it out. So here's my piece I cut out. Okay, and we're going to adhere it to this board. So I'm going to use Deco Art. This is Deco Art brand Americana Decoupage for paper. Okay, this is the one that I like to use the most, and so it's what we're going to use on here. I'm just going to dump a little bit out and take my dampened foam roller and spread it around. I want a nice, somewhat generous coat on here so that this paper adheres well. I want to make sure that your edges get good. I'll put a little bit more on here. Okay, and then for maximum adhesion, it's good to apply this to the back of the paper as well. But when you do this, you got to make sure you get it on your surface well, because if you won't be able to adjust it, because it's gonna like stick immediately. So I'm going to line up the bottom here, and it's okay if it's a little long on either side. We can trim that later. And I'm gonna smooth it, just kind of test the waters here. Alright. Now we just want to push it down really good. You'll want to paint the edges of your board, so if you want your edges to be white or black or whatever, you need to do that before you apply your paper. And I had already done that because I'd already painted the other side. So I'm going to smooth this out a little bit. We don't want to fill any air bubbles in there. This tool that I'm using actually came with a bottle of Mod Podge that I bought one time. It's a nice one for smoothing things out with. but you can use a spatula, an old credit card or old gift card. You want to make sure that there is nothing oozing out, big buildup oozing out around your edges. And then the extra paper that is over it, we are going to come back later and trim that off when it gets dry. Alright, this feels pretty smooth to me. So I'm going to take my roller, because it's still got that decoupage medium in it, and I'm going to roll over the paper and give it a nice coat, smooth it out. I'm going to give less and less pressure now so I can smooth out that decoupage medium. And I can see right here that it lifted off of the board a little bit. I'm just going to, with my finger, very gently push that down, because if I push too much on there, my finger will get stuck and then I will tear my paper. And I don't want that. So this is looking pretty good. Get this edge a little bit more. So I'm going to let this dry. First, I'm going to find my holes. I want to poke the holes while they're wet. So I'm using a toothpick. I'm very gently poking up from the back because I don't want to lift the paper up. And then I'm going to go from the front and push the toothpick in there and kind of turn it to open up the hole, the entire hole there. And then flatten the paper down right there, because we don't want any paper lifting or tearing. Push that back through there. Got a little bit of a tear right there. Push it down with my finger. And right there still feels like it may not be completely stuck, but after it dries, if I have any parts of my edges that are the paper's not stuck well, I'm just going to take a small paintbrush and go along the edge of that paper and then work it down into there. A little bit of a bubble there, but that should go away once the paper has dried. So I'm going to set this aside and let it dry, and I'm going to get my line drawing transferred onto my tracing paper. Alright, mine's dry. I've transferred on my line drawing, although you can't see it very well. It is on there. Okay, so before I get started painting, I want to trim the excess paper that is along the edge. So I'm going to lay it on a cutting mat. Make sure you don't leave it on whatever you paint on, you know, your surface here, because you'll just cut into it. And I'm just going to run a sharp blade down the edges and remove any excess paper. This side looks pretty darn good. A little bit. And then up here, you want to make sure that your blade is sharp so that you don't tear your paper. If it's not sharp, you're just going to tear your paper as you go along here and make a little bit of a mess. And I kind of got into my wood there. Alright, kind of messed up the edges right there, but the majority of it looks pretty good. Alright, let me grab my paints out and we're going to get started painting on this one. Alright, I hope you're ready to get started on this project. Now I wanted to give you a tip on this particular line drawing. If you are buying my packet and using the line drawing, in the packet the line drawing is reduced to 90% to fit on the piece of paper. But if you're going to paint it on this specific surface here, this is the arch plaque from my website, then you will have to enlarge this pattern to 110% to get it the size that I'm painting today. But you can certainly paint it the smaller size on here, not a problem. I just wanted you to be aware of that. It does say that in my packet underneath the surface in the listing of you know, all the things that you will need for this project on that page. It does mention that in there, but I just wanted to let you know that if you're planning on painting it on this particular plaque, then you need to enlarge it to 110%. Okay, I'm going to try and work everything out on this camera because my, excuse me, my camera for my palette is having some issues. So I'll be doing it the way I used to when I first started making my videos. I'll bring my palette over into the camera shot if I'm doing something special on there. A lot of the times you'll be able to see it right here. But if I work farther over on the palette, I'll try to remember to bring it in. And of course, when I have a close-up shot, I won't have the palette in shot. So that's why my design is a little bit more to the left of the camera shot this time. So we want to get started painting in our ice cream. Okay, so we're going to paint it in with buttermilk. DecoArt Americana paints is what I'm using. This color is buttermilk. This is going to be for our ice cream. Now it's going to take a couple of coats probably to cover up those stripes there. If you want to undercoat everything with like a very light gray before you start, you can certainly do that. I'm going to see how this works out. If it becomes an issue with the stripes, because I've never painted on this particular paper before, then I will undercoat this. And it really is not covering well, so I'm going to pick up a little bit, I think a little bit of burnt umber. And I'll just make my first coat. Well, let's see if burnt umber will work. Burnt umber is kind of a transparent color, so it may not even do the job that I want it to do here. Yeah, that's going to work. So I'll just mix those two for my first coat here. And we're staying inside the ice cream. We're just going to go on all the way out to the edge, our line drawing here, because we're going to be covering that with chocolate, but we still need our ice cream to be out there. I know this doesn't look like ice cream right now, but that's only because I had to mix that little bit of burnt umber in there. When you put your second coat on here, you'll do just straight buttermilk. Okay, then we'll be seeing our ice cream down in here as well, so let's put some of this down here. And you'll probably have to apply 2 coats of buttermilk on top of this to get it back to its color that we need it to be. And I'm using a 12 Black Silver Dynasty brush. But you use whatever brush is comfortable in the space that you are painting. Everybody has their favorite brushes they like to work with, so I prefer a larger brush when I'm painting, so. Alright, so that's our first coat right there of that. We'll let that dry and come back and put a couple of coats of just buttermilk on there. Now I want to go ahead and paint in my whipped cream up here. So I'm going to take a little bit of white. This is Snow White or Titanium White. And I want to mix a little bit of blue with it. So I'm going to mix a little bit of baby blue with it. The baby blue is a little bit too dark. But we want to start our whipped cream out in more of a blue color. So just mix a nice little blue here. And again, it's going to take 2 or 3 coats to cover those red stripes. Come all the way up to your cherry. We're not going to worry about the glass right now. And we can get a base coat on our cherry of Santa Red. And I know this will definitely, I'm going to mix a little bit of white in there, because, or maybe a little bit of buttermilk. That would be a little bit more opaque, because reds are pretty notorious for being transparent. So we want to get a good undercoat of this mix of buttermilk and Santa Red. And you may have to apply 2 coats of this and then come back with your just Santa Red and paint over. Alright, I'm going to get this dry, and I'm going to get my second, possibly third coats on. They're going to be done just the exact same way, only we're going to do just buttermilk on these areas. We're still going to do the blue-white mix here, but you're probably going to have to do it 2 or 3 times. And possibly even 4, depends on how well you can get those stripes covered up in there. Okay, if you want to mix a little bit of the buttermilk in with some white and start that route, you can. And then up here, a little bit of buttermilk in with your red, Santa Red, and do 2 coats of that, and then a coat or 2 of just Santa Red. So I'm going to get that done and come back and show you what it looks like. Base coats are dry, so now I want to, this is just for your benefit, I'm going to kind of put a little bit of a line there. We're going to try and create 2 scoops of ice cream here, and maybe a third one down here. So this scoop of ice cream is going to come down into the container a little bit. So I believe I have on my pattern some kind of guidelines where you can go to with these lines. I actually want this one to scoop down a little bit more. To make it, we're going to try and make it look like there's 1, 2, 3 scoops of ice cream in this container. So we're going to put some golden straw out on our palette now. And I'm going to put some more white out. I've still got some of my buttermilk on there. And we're going to try and make these look like some scoops of ice cream. We still got all of our chocolate and everything to put on here, so we don't have to be too particular about it. So I'm going to take some of this golden straw, and I want to mix a little bit of the our base color in here, which is a buttermilk, just to make a little bit lighter color than what the golden straw is. We can come back in and darken it, and we'll have to darken it just a little bit. So just a little tiny bit of, zip me in just a little bit. And we're just going to start creating some definition. I'm not painting on my lines here because I want to go in and erase them. So I'm just going to keep it kind of right next to them. I'm going to put some of this color, even though we won't see it down here when we put our chocolate in. I'm going to put a little bit of this down here, and we more than likely won't see it down here as well, but you know, just in case things show up a little bit, we want to see a little bit of that in there. I'm going to put a little bit above this line. And I don't have much paint on my brush at all, so I'm not leaving a whole lot of, not laying a whole lot of paint down. I'm side loaded for my float. I'm going to go underneath our whipped cream. Again, we probably won't see this in the end because we're going to have all this hot fudge, but I'm going to bring a little bit of that down into the ice cream, just a little bit. Same here. And it's really a very small amount of paint. A little bit of water. I mean, I don't have hardly any paint on my brush here. Bring some of that up in there a little bit. Alright, I want to erase my lines that I drew in here. Brush eraser shavings away from your paint. So we kind of formed a little bit of some scoops in here. I think now I'm going to take a tiny little bit of burnt umber here, maybe. And burnt umber's kind of dried out. Let me put some fresh out here. Straight there. Oh, cattywampus. Alright, I'm going to take my golden straw, a tiny little bit of brown in there, burnt umber, and a little bit more. I don't want this turning brown. I just want to darken up some of this shadowy stuff under here. Laying that down in there. Right here we want to have a little bit more of this kind of dirty golden color. Okay, we can put a little bit down here. Like I said, once we get this glass painted in, we're not going to see a whole lot of this stuff going on inside here. Okay, we'll wash that out because we're going to get ready to start adding a little bit of highlight on here now. We're going to do that with some Snow White. I want some to go through here. Again, we're going to have our hot fudge going on through here, so I'm just putting a little bit in there, kind of just mushing it in, not being too extremely careful about it. Right there in the center. Down here, again, we're not going to see much of this when we're done. A bit more up through here. just kind of mushing it in and just scooting it around that that area. And you do this a couple of times because we want to bring a little bit of brightness in here. It's mostly the top part of the ice cream that we're going to see highlights on. So we can come back in and add a little bit after we get some of our hot fudge on here. So that was with Snow White. So now we want to put our pattern back on here. Now you don't have to if you just want to kind of go with your whatever, however you want to make it look, your hot fudge. It can look completely different from mine. Lock that down so it doesn't move. So I'm going to line my pattern back up on here. Get a piece of tape to hold it in place here. Oops, just moved it. Now if you want, you can leave it taped on here when you tape it down originally, and then just flip the line drawing up and wide angle out so you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I'm just lining my pattern back up on here. Okay, that looks pretty close. This is the item that you want to make sure you've got lined up pretty good. And then I'll grab my gray graphite. I've got a pretty worn out piece, so I'm not sure how much graphite it will actually leave behind. And I'm going to start adding in where I want to put my hot fudge. And like I said, you can be creative and create your own little drizzles of hot fudge on here. And then of course we can see the hot fudge, you know, kind of down in the glass. It's really mushed around and down, you know, melted down into the bottom. Okay, so we can see where our hot fudge is going to go. We're going to start adding that layer in now. So I'm going to begin painting mine in. This is not going to be dark enough by any means, but I'm going to start with some milk chocolate. And this bottle's almost empty. And I think I'll switch to a round brush. I don't know if I can grab one out of my container here. Elusive brushes. And I'm just going to paint this in with this milk chocolate. It's going to be much darker than this because fudge is much darker than this, so I'm going to mix a little bit of water in with that so it will flow a little bit easier off my brush. And we're going to go underneath our whipped cream area here. Try and stay off my glass here. We'll put some kind of behind the glass later, but for now we want to stay off of it. Grab my other brush here. We want to kind of blur out the edges of this, so I'm going to side load with a little bit of that and kind of float a little bit. Kind of make it look like it's melting into that ice cream a little bit. Zoom in just a scooch so you can kind of see that. right up to that edge. Alright, I'm going to grab some water and just a little bit of this paint and kind of wiggle float some of this around. We want it to look like it's kind of melting into that ice cream a little bit. Maybe not quite that much. That's a little more than what I want. We're going to come back and brighten that ice cream in a minute to get it a little bit brighter. This is our undercoating for our fudgy stuff going on here. Grab some water. And I'm just gonna, I still have just a tiny bit of paint on my brush, so I'll just kind of use that to scooch that out there a little bit. We'll go down here below and do the same thing. Our hot fudge coming down. You want this connect to this, so wherever there is stuff going, you want your drizzle to kind of follow that path. And then down here it's going to be, I'm going to grab some water here, a little tiny bit of paint, just a tiny bit. Because really down here we want it to really look like it's melting into that ice cream. Oops. Back to my round brush here. I'm going to bring a little bit more over this direction for that part that's coming down. And then this part that's coming down didn't quite need to be that wide, so I can adjust that, erase that line there as long as I don't get paint on it. Alright, a little bit of water, and then kind of blur it a little bit down here. I'm going to erase that line real quick. I know that paint's still wet, so I'll try and stay out of it. And this line. Anything you haven't gone over with paint, you can erase. If you have paint on it, it's not coming off, so. Okay, we're going to see a little bit of this behind our glass, and actually our glass we're going to have to paint in to cover those red lines, so most of this is going to be completely unseen by the time we get done with it. But that's beginning our hot fudge drizzle. I'm going to start taking some of the burnt umber now and working that into our hot fudge. And just kind of tapping it in there. You don't have to completely cover up your milk chocolate color on there. Some of it can peek through still and give it a little bit of a highlight. I need some water. And burnt umber is kind of a transparent color, so it can really help with the other color showing through. I'm very choppily adding this in here. Just a tapping, kind of almost a chopping motion, making it look, you know, more textury, like it's melting down. Water. Remove it right there. Damp brush. That's all you need. Of course, the outside will be maybe a little bit darker. But when we're done with this, we won't, like I said, we won't see a whole lot in the bottom of it. I just have a little bit on my brush here, just kind of wiggling some of that more melty stuff in there. I don't want to put too much more up here. Let's put some of this here. Okay, that was burnt umber. I want to brighten up our highlight on here a little bit. So I'm just going to take some Snow White and kind of tap it into these areas. Tap it out with my finger. I want to see some lighter colors in here so we can kind of have that look of coldness. Just kind of blur it out with your fingertip. Don't stress out about this part. I'm just tapping some in. And then kind of just blurring it with my finger. I'm going to go ahead and do some down here. Like I said, we won't see a lot of this once we're done. But it's good to have it in there. Be a little lighter right through here and here. And I'll take it off of the hot fudge right there. And we're getting some more brightness. We're going to come back and do that again here in a minute. I want that to get dry. I don't want to start lifting it up. So now let's start darkening our hot fudge. And I'm going to go with some soft black here. I did a sample painting of this quite a long time ago. I don't know how long it was, maybe almost 2 years now. But I don't remember what colors I used or even what paints I used. So I'm going to go with some soft black. Sorry, I got to clean the top of my bottle off here. It's a big mess. Okay, hopefully I don't have it all over me now. Okay, so we want to start darkening up our hot fudge. So with our soft black, I'm going to side load because I want to be a little bit more controlling with it now and make it look just more fudgy. And keeping this a little more on the left side maybe. Underneath this is going to be obviously darker, so we can kind of pull some of that down into the fudge a little bit. Down here next to the glass it'll be a little bit darker because that's where it's kind of pooling like P-O-O-L-I-N-G, not P-U-L-L or P-U-L. How do you spell the word? I do know how to spell. A little bit darker right down here. Now we're getting some hot fudge on there. Looking good. Don't be afraid of this. Just have fun. Oh my gosh. What a fun one. Alright, I'm going to turn this around so I can get that outer edge, more of the paint on the outer edge over here. And down here. It's looking good. Alright, let's put some along here. Up on the tip of the brush here so I don't have to go down to a smaller brush. And just kind of scooting that paint down along there. And I forgot to put fudge coming down that side there, so I'm going to have to go back and do that. And even though I did put the hot fudge here, we need kind of the reflection, a little bit of reflection of our ice cream in there, so I'm going to have to go back in and add a little bit of buttermilk in there. Oh, that's looking good. Flip it around here. Along this outside edge. I just have side loaded for a float is all I've done here. And you can see I didn't cover up all of my other two colors. You should still be able to see a little bit of each color in there, and that's what you want. So let me go back in here and put a little bit of, because we'll have a little bit of reflected color through here, and then I'll just add my hot fudge back over it. This will be from our ice cream that's kind of behind the glass here that we can't see. When we come back over it with our glass color, then it will look completely different through there. While that's drying, let's go ahead and tap a little bit more white into our brighter areas. If you get it on your hot fudge, just go clean it off with a damp brush. Taking my damp brush and kind of softening some of those edges. They were kind of a little bit stark in there. I'm still going to put some down here. This will still be a brighter color of ice cream. And some right through here. And I could put a little bit lighter over here in this section. It could have a little bit more highlight in it. That's really going to fade down in there because I had a lot of water in my brush still. Alright, I'm going to go back over this buttermilk area through here. Reflection through there. And then we'll add some of our hot fudge reflections in there. So we started with our milk chocolate. And we got some here, we're going to have some here. My buttermilk is still wet, so it's going to blend in with it a little bit. We have this one that's coming down through here and meeting that one, and then we'll have this one. Okay, I know it looks like it's on top of the glass right now, but you gotta trust me. It doesn't have to be as dark as what is up there, so because it's behind the glass. Now I'm tapping in some burnt umber. You can very quickly catch it up here, and I'm just going to keep with my round brush here and tap a little bit of the darker in here. Not too much, because we want this to push back in there after we add our other stuff. This area right here is pretty wet, so it's still lifting up a little bit of that buttermilk. And I think while that's drying, I'm going to go ahead and darken underneath my glass area right here with a little bit of the golden straw and a little bit of burnt umber. Go underneath here. Just in the ice cream areas. It just needs to be a scooch darker. Okay, we're looking pretty good here. I need to get this part dry. Well, actually, I can just let it dry on its own. I think we'll go up and start working on the whipped cream area now and let this get good and dry before we go over it with the color that we're going to put on for the glass. Alright, our whipped cream is going to be pretty easy, I think. So if you want to just bring your pattern over and give a look at where we got some, you know, some stuff going on. So let's say there's some the whipped cream's going to have some valleys in it, some highs and lows in it. So we kind of need to know where those are going to be. So we've got this painted with this darker color. We actually want to start adding some white on here first before we add in some shadows. And this is going to take a few layers on here. I'm going to try and stay off of my cherry, but if I get on it, I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm going to go in between these lines that I've created here with my Snow White. I like to stay off of those lines because I would like to come back and erase them. But I want to go in between them. And I'm going to come out past just a little bit. A little bit of choppiness there. If I get on my cherry, I'm totally not going to worry about it. I mean, I can come back in and put that on, back on, so no big deal. It's just paint. I don't want you to stress out. I just got paint on that line, so that line is definitely staying in the project. Okay, so we've got some stuff going on, starting with our whipped cream. This is looking delicious. Okay, that's drying, so we're going to figure out where our stem is coming in here at. I think I'll go ahead and paint my stem in while my white is drying here. And I probably will come back and tap a little bit more white in there. So my stem, I'm just going to start out with some burnt umber with it. Maybe add a tiny bit of milk chocolate in there. Cherry stems would typically have green on it, but the green is not in my palette for this design, so we're not going to add green. So it's a little bit fatter out here. I think I'll add a little soft black into that burnt umber. So a little bit of burnt umber, and you might want to go down to a detail liner here for this stem, so you can get it nice and a nice, not too thick is what I'm trying to say. I don't want you to get it too awful thick. Alright, I'm going to get the moisture out of my brush here and grab some white. Again, we want to add some in here. I'm not taking it as far now, I'm just kind of keeping it more controlled in some areas. Right in the center of most of these areas right here. A little bit right there, a little bit right here, and just a touch down here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I mean, you don't really have to worry about cleaning the white too much off of your hot fudge, because, you know, when we add the glass look on here, we're going to be putting white on it anyway. So I think it's looking pretty good. Let's go back up here to our whipped cream. Couldn't think of what it was called. Whipped cream. I'm side loading my flat brush. So far I've only used a flat brush and a round brush and a mop brush. So not a whole lot of colors, not a whole lot of brushes. But you can certainly use whatever brush that you prefer to use. My brushes are always just a guideline if you need some help trying to figure out what kind of brush. But as painters, we all kind of figure out what brushes we like the best and where to use them, how to use them, what works best for you. So I want you to continue to do that. So we've got some more white on there, so that's brightening up that. So I'm going to let that dry because I need it before I put that on there to erase my graphite lines. So let's work on our cherry now. So we put our stem in. That was a mix of soft black and burnt umber. So I want to start shading on our cherry. And we are going to shade with, what do I have? I have deep burgundy here. We're going to start with this color and see how well it covers on that Santa red. So I'm side loading for a float. I want the darker side to be over here. So I'm just going to give a little float of that color right there. And I'm going to put some of this right down in here where the stem goes. Try and stay out of my whipped cream. If you can stay out of your whipped cream, that is the best thing. And I am going to have to grab another brush now. I'm going to have to grab a detail liner so I can put some highlights on our stem here. And I'm going to take milk chocolate and a little bit of the buttermilk and put a little bit of a highlight on there, on that stem. I'm going to wipe off and grab some snow. just Snow White. I didn't wash my brush, and just tap a little bit on there. Nothing serious. I'll wash my brush out and get a little bit of soft black. I'm going to pull this up here and put a little bit at the back of the tip of the stem, and I actually think I'm going to go along the lower edge of it and just kind of create that stem there. That needs to dry, so I'm going to go in and erase any of these lines that I can now. And the ones that won't erase, those are the ones that I got paint on. So I got to make sure when I put my shading colors in here, which I'm not going to need a whole lot of shading in here, that I'm going to cover those up. So I'm going to get some, I'm not sure this color is going to work. It might be too bright for my whipped cream, too dark. I got some ultramarine blue here. I also have navy blue, or royal navy, I guess. I have royal navy. I might try the royal navy and see how it works. I want just a tiny bit of darkening in there. Just a tiny, tiny little bit. So I'm going to actually get some of my baby blue out, so it's not going to be quite that dark. So grab some baby blue and mix it with a lot more baby blue. So let's do 3 baby blues and 1 tiny little drop of royal navy. And we got a couple more layers of white to add on here, but we want to create a few little darker valley things in here. I'm up on the very tip of my brush here, and just in the areas where I didn't put white, this is where I want to put this. So that's a pretty wide area there, so it might have a little bit more color in it. Okay, and we're going to put more white on there. So we need that blue to dry. That was a little bit of royal navy, tiny little bit, and I dipped into my baby blue 3 times. Okay, this is dry, so we're going to apply another layer of white. So I am just dipping into my white, just slightly blending it on my brush because I want some fairly thick paint here. We're still going to brighten up. If you go over some of your shaded areas, not a big deal, but you want to start being a little more choppy and just try and create a little bit of soft form to this. You know how whipped cream looks when it's all piled up. Don't go on your letters out there, because you don't want to get it on those. I mean, we haven't painted the letters in yet, so it's not a problem, but I'm just tapping very lightly onto some of those darker areas, so it kind of pushes them back into the whipped cream just a little bit. I see I got some paint on my red, so I'm going to dampen my brush and clean that off real quick. Alright, let's darken the color on the cherry. So I'm going to take my deep burgundy and add a tiny bit of that blue in there. And tap my paper towel. That removes excess water and paint out of my brush. We need water and paint, but we don't want to have a lot of it on our brush, especially when we're painting in small areas here. And we're going to keep that more to the left and bottom, and then put some here in the well. I call it a well. I'm not really sure. It's the well of the stem. We need some of that in there. Okay. I think we need to put just a scooch up here. And our cherry's starting to take some nice shape. I'm going to put a little bit, not too much, just along this edge. Not too much. I mean, I was really up on the tip of that, really just keeping it tiny, tiny little bit of paint on there. We're definitely going to come back and go over our white again. I got some red in my white out there, so let's fix that. So I'm going to grab some white again. This may be the last time we have to apply white on here. Oh, let me remove that right there. I liked that little dip that was in my whipped cream right here. Okay, our whipped cream's looking pretty good. Okay, I think I'm going to leave my whipped cream right there for now till we get other stuff done. We can always come back and, you know, add more, whatever we need to it later if, you know, if it's needed. So let's go back up to our cherry. I want one more layer of that shading on there. And that's the deep burgundy with just a tiny little bit of the blue. I mix the two together. It makes this really deep, rich, kind of purplish color. And cherries are, to me, are just a rich, dark color anyway. So I like to try and make mine that color. Go out here to the edge a little bit. Kind of walk that up into the cherry. And then one more time right here. And then we'll add our highlight on our cherry. Alright, I'm going to mix a little bit of Santa Red and white to get this like rose color right here. And we don't want it to be a bright pink color, but we do want a little bit of this in here. I'm just going to tap some in there and then take the water edge of my brush and kind of smooth it out. We're going to begin our highlight on here. So we're adding that color first. We need to let it dry, and then we're going to add more white to that mixture and get it lighter. And it shouldn't take too long for it to dry, so I'm just going to dip right into my white and go down here beside what I already mixed and just use the color that's the paint that's left in my brush to lighten it, and back right in here, tap a little bit, take the water edge of my brush. You notice I didn't cover as big an area as I covered before. Okay, just tap a little bit of that on there. I'm going to wipe my brush out. I don't want to wash it because I don't want to get a ton of water in my brush. So I'm going to wipe out my brush and pick up just white. I've still got a little tiny bit of pink in there. And we're going to tap this right here. Take the water edge and very gently put a little bit over here. You can use a detail liner over here for this edge if you want. I'm going to make a little bit of reflected highlight over here. I might go back a step and grab some of that pink. There we go. We just want it barely on that edge. Don't get it too much. And now I'm going to take my round brush and a bright highlight of white. And I think that'll be it for our cherry. Oops, let's go the other direction. I got my cherry a little bit shaped, not quite right over here. So in order for me to fix that, I'm going to take my white and my whipped cream white and just shape that edge of the cherry a little bit. And take the water edge and smooth it out. Get it a little bit nicer shape on there. Now you can take a little bit of the baby blue. I'm just going to leave that white on my brush and mix some baby blue with it right there on my brush. You ideally want that to be dry, and put a little bit underneath here for a little bit of a shadow. Right next to that cherry, just a little bit. Come back here just a little bit with some. If you get too much, you just go right back into your white. Wash your brush out and go back into your white. And brighten up wherever you feel like you may have gotten a little bit too much. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'm going to wide angle out because that's going to help you see it a lot better. And see how we're looking. Isn't that looking delicious? We're going to start working on the glass now because we have our ice cream done, our hot fudge is done, our whipped cream is done, our cherry's done. So now it's time to work on the glass. Alright, I'm going to put some fresh white out. And I'm going to start using a filbert brush. This is a 6 filbert brush. It is the Black Silver series from Dynasty. Number 4955 if you want the brush number. But seriously, use whatever brush you are comfortable using. So I'm going to be up on the chisel edge of this brush, and I'm going to begin outlining the shape of my glass here with my Snow White. The glass is going to be thicker down here at the bottom, so I'm going to make that a little bit wider. Turn it around here and come up this edge. I want to keep the shape of my glass nice. Okay, I'm going to go around this. Now down on the foot of the glass, we're going to have to add some color in there. Oops, I'm going to paint here. I'm going to go along each edge of this. I didn't do a very good job of that. Goes up here and down here and around, down and up and around, something like that. While I have my brush wet, I'm just going to pull a little bit of this. I don't want any thick edge paint here. I'm just going to pull a little bit of this from the top down a little bit. I don't want to have a hard line where I just painted in there. Okay, this line down here I'm not going to worry so much about. Now this down here we're going to have to add some color in here, so I want to reflect some of the ice cream down in here. So I'm going to grab that buttermilk and put a little bit of that in here. Wipe my brush off and go into some, I think I'll go into some burnt umber here. Actually, I'm going to have to wash it because I don't want it blending. It's okay if it blends a little bit, but I want it a little bit darker out here. Get some more burnt umber. So I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt umber and chocolate. And I'm just going to grab all three colors here. The soft black. I want to tap some reflection of this color here, and maybe some out here, a little bit through here, right through there, some reflection of this. Go back into my buttermilk, and I want to put a little bit more of this in here. Actually, I want a little bit more of that. Right through here. Not too much. Just a little bit down there. Don't go crazy. Okay, so you can already see how my white faded way down in there because the colors that are underneath it. But I'm going to quickly go around out here. Our stem coming down like this. And around the outside out here. I'm going to pull some down into that. All the way around. Pull a little bit of that and keep your shapes nice. Don't let them get out of control here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit more along this outer edge out here. And on the top edge up here, I'm going to have it be the brightest up here, so I'm going to put a little bit more. This is just straight Snow White along this top edge and pull some of that down. And now I want to start creating some character. I guess is what you would call it in my glass here. So I'm just going to start following the shape, but coming away from the edge, leaving a gap. Follow the shape, put a stroke there, a very soft stroke, put one here, follow the shape, and we're just going to give it some highs and lows on the glass. This is how we're going to do that. it down here. We want the glass to look thick. Okay, so we're getting some good looking glass here. So this is just kind of our first layer, and then I went back and tweaked a couple of places. We want this to get dry before we continue on. I'm just going over that edge again. I felt like my paint was very watered down when I did this edge, so I'm just going to repeat it very quickly. Okay, so that's our first layer on our glass there. Let's repeat these steps again. And I'm going to be using black in the lettering, I think. So I'm going to pull some black out, and we're going to use some black to shade a little bit on our fudge. But I'm going to take, actually I'm not going to take my white yet. I'm going to go ahead and do that on my fudge real quick, because I want to create a little bit of a gray color to add onto our glass to create some more valley type areas. So I'm going to take my black, add a tiny bit of soft black to it, and I'm going to create some darker areas in my hot fudge. Really make this fudge look rich, and we're definitely going to go underneath all of the whipped cream. I'm going to go along the outer edges of out here, and on the left sides, just kind of tapping it in there. I'm not being smooth about this at all. And then we want to go along the base here next to the glass. And I think I will take a tiny little bit of this and add onto our cherry. Really make that cherry look rich. Okay. That looks good. Now we can carry the black up into our lettering because we've added it down in here. And I want to mix a gray. Get some more white out here, and I want to mix a light gray, maybe almost to a medium gray color, with my black and my white here. And I might go just slightly darker, so I might lean more towards a medium gray here. And I want to put this, I'm going to have to go darker because I can't see it. And I want to put this and start creating some areas in the glass. I want to go in between where I remember to shape follow. Shape follow your glass is important. I'm going to go out here on the edges a little bit and just pull some of that in. If we end up not liking it, we'll just cover it up with some white. I don't want you to stress out about this. Okay, we need to have a little bit of some stuff going on here. Create some highs and lows in our glass up here. I need a little bit of water. Okay, down here on our stem, I'm going to go underneath that bowl and pull a little bit of that out. I'll go beside the stem area and a little bit back here and back here. I'm just putting a little bit in those places and just kind of pulling it out. We're going to add white on here, so it's going to take care of some of this. I need to mix a little bit more. Just mix it as you go. It is perfectly fine if this does not all have the same value. Okay, we're getting some good stuff going here. I'm just going to kind of mush that a little bit, maybe blur it out some. I want a little bit more here. I'll add white on top of that. Okay, so now we're adding a little bit of form to our glass piece here. And we can put a little bit underneath here. And I'm going to put some in here. I'll probably end up covering that up with white and coming back in and adding it back in, but I want a little bit of kind of something going on there. And okay, I'm going to leave it there for now with my gray. And we're going to come back and start adding some more white on here. Alright, let me grab some fresh white out here and we will finish out this glass, or hopefully finish it out. I'm going to add a little bit of reflection stuff going on in it, but we're going to start with adding more white in here. Let me get all the moisture out of my brush. I feel like there's a ton of water in it. I don't really want to have much moisture in it. I'm still using my filbert brush out here on the outer edge. You can go to a round brush if you can handle that brush a little bit easier. I'm going to go up here above that dark gray and pull some of that up into the glass. Alright, we're going to do our sections here. I'm going to wipe my brush off because I want to blur that out a little bit just by dry brushing over the glass. I'm going over the whole thing, all the colors. I wiped whatever paint was in my brush out of it, and now I'm just kind of going over the whole thing. I need a little bit more, so I'm going to load my brush, go to my paper towel, and wipe it out because I don't want to be laying in a lot of color in here. A little bit more, pick it up, wipe it off. All of this stuff needs to be blurred out, kind of pushed behind the glass. We don't want to see it on top of the glass. Now you can use an old brush to do this if you're afraid you're going to damage your good brush. Alright, back into some white. I want this to be brighter. Work that up on the glass, shape forming, and just scooted a little bit of that paint up there. Okay, and I feel like the gray is just slightly too dark, so I'm going to put some more white over that gray. Okay, let's go up here to the rim, and we're going to go along this top edge. And I'm going to begin pulling a little bit of this down. Shape follow. I want this edge down here to be a little bit brighter because it's on top. Okay, let's go down here to the bottom. And we're going to go right here. More paint. Right here. Through there, and then we want to shape follow our base here. Make sure we get the outer edge. And don't try to stay off of your gray. You need to put some of this on the gray. The gray is just like a shadow area, but we don't want it standing on top. So the gray will get covered. It's just going to start creating a darker color back in there. So for right there, I kind of want it to be a little bit darker right there. And just go along here. I'm just lightly brushing it on there. That down just a little bit. It's looking pretty good. Okay, let's make some really bright spots on this glass, and then a couple of shadings, a couple of tints of color on here, and I think it'll be done. So we want it to be, I'm floating now with this Snow White. We want to make sure our glass goes around the ice cream. Alright, I'm going to go along the outer edges out here. Go here, here, and a little bit through here. I really need to darken underneath that bowl just a tiny bit. I'm going to pull some across here. And then go around the edge of this. I really want to define the base. We'll be shading a little bit underneath this. Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to make it more like an old ad would be, and I'm not sure they had much shading on their stuff. I'm going to go up on the chisel edge now. Maybe. And pull some brighter highlights on there. I don't like that one right there. I'm going to get rid of that one. Alright, a couple through here. Right through there. You can still see a little bit more of the background through that base than I want to, but it's okay. Okay, I'm going to have to adjust this base down here. It's quite looking the way I want it to look. So I'm going to float a little bit of that gray underneath it. Give it some weight. A little bit down here. A little bit back here. And I still want a little bit of it right there. And actually, I'm going to put some of this underneath. Whew. That was a lot. Underneath there, give that a little bit of a shadow underneath it. Alright, I'm going to take my round brush here. I need some brighter highlights through here. I'm definitely going to have to sit back and look at this foot. The foot is the one thing that I'm not quite happy about at this point. So I'm going to sit back and look at it after I get everything else done. I want a little bit brighter. Okay, looking pretty good. A little bit sharper right down here. Form that glass bowl right there. Make the glass look a little bit thicker. Okay. So I'm going to work on that because I'm not too happy with that, how that looks right there. I think I need to pull my strokes down instead of across. Okay, that looks better. I'm much happier with that. So you're going to want to add your white on here, I don't know, 2 or 3, well, I think I did it 3 times to get it on there, but you're still not covering everything. I did it 3 times around the border, but I still kept it kind of soft. The only place where it's really got a defining line is right here and on the outer edge out here. Everything else I tried to keep a little bit on the softer side. Now I want to shade a little bit inside. I'm going to use my golden straw with a little bit of burnt umber. Create a little bit of a... Stay out of my brown. I'm just going on the ice cream itself. And create a little bit of a shadow there. And see, we did cover all that up, but this is still a brighter area, even though I put white over it because it was lighter behind it. It makes that white look a little bit brighter. So I think it's looking pretty good. I'm going to wide angle out so you can see it a little bit better. I think it looks delicious. The glass turned out pretty good. You can go back and add some really, really super bright highlights on here if you want to. I'm going to add a little tint of red on here, I think. I'm going to take my Santa red and if I can get some burgundy. a little bit of the two of those. I'm just going to create just the sheerest of color. I've got a little bit of water in my brush, so it's really thinning that paint down quite a bit. And I'll put a little bit of this on here for reflection. And you probably can't see it. And maybe a little bit through here. A little bit of reflection from that cherry. It's a very soft color, so it's going to kind of push down in there. And then I think I'll do the same thing with some soft black, maybe a little bit of burnt umber in there, so it's not quite such a dark, rich color. And we'll put some, I think I might just stick with burnt umber. That soft black's going to turn a little purple. Just some reflection. We don't want too much going on down here. Just tap a little bit with my finger and kind of smooth it out. I'm going to take that down just a little bit, dampen it, just rub it a little bit with my finger. I think that's a little bit brighter than what I want it to be. Just want it soft. This is my tri-eraser, so I can either dampen this or dampen the eraser. And very, very gently erase, and it will move the top layer off of this. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, wide angle out, and we're going to work on our lettering and then see if I want to put a shadow underneath this or antique the piece itself, the outer edges of it, make it look a little more old and worn and stuff. So let's get ready to do that. I am going to do all of my lettering in black. That is the color that I wanted to do it in. So you have some options. You can take your black paint and a round brush, which is, I love to paint in lettering. It teaches you such good brush control, and it's really, I really love doing it. But if you don't want to do it, you struggle with it, or your hand's not as steady as what you wish, you can stencil. If you can find a stencil that's like this. I may make a stencil for this. Right now I'm not planning on it, but I might. You can also use these paint markers. I have Mosea's brand, Ohuhu, and Posca. And I really like these. These are a fatter nib on here. On the Mosea's, the ones that I have, and the Ohuhu. And then the Posca ones have a finer nib on it. And they are all great markers, paint markers. You have to shake these up before you use them, or you can use an Identi-Pen. Now, I do sell these on my website. It has a skinny end and a fat end. Okay, so I'm going to use this particular marker. Now, I'm going to use the fat end because I want this to be bigger through here. And I'm just going to follow my lines, and I'm going to do this a couple of times. Now, if you have the paint markers, one of those fat nibbed paint markers would work perfectly for this. Okay, I'll grab one of the paint markers. Let's see. I like them all. They all work splendidly. the brands that I have here. I have tried a couple of other brands I'm not as, don't like as well. Okay, this is the Ohuhu one. So I'll show you how it works. I'm just going to go right over this line because I want this to be fat. Just going to follow that curve and make a nice fat line here. Okay, I want to do the same down here. I want to make sure I don't go through that because it's not dry. Up to my ice cream, kind of sneak up on it there. Same over here, kind of sneak up on that. Okay, so there is the beginning of my letters. Now I can use this one down here as well if I want to, because these letters are kind of fat and you just kind of fill them in. But it wouldn't work up here on these because it's just too fat. Now this one, this is the Posca, and they sell, I bought all my paint markers on Amazon. And they sell these in different nib sizes. And this is, it's not English, so I don't know. I think this is a fine nib. It's not an ultra fine, I don't think. It's 1M.24, whatever that is. So with this one, I'm going to go down here and work because those letters are still very wet up there, or that marker is still very wet up there. So all I'm going to do down here, excuse me, I want to get my line drawing out so I can make sure I'm getting my letters painted in here correctly, is I'm going to follow my line drawing. And then I will just fill in with this marker. So this is just another way if you don't like to paint your lettering. I absolutely love to paint lettering in. I just think it is very fun. For me, it's relaxing. I enjoy doing it. Alright, my E, I didn't kind of get it very good. So my letters may not look the best, but these are definitely hand lettering. We're going to do a drop shadow beside all of these. That's going to make it look a little bit more old. Oh, probably weren't even on camera for that. So I'm basically just filling in here. And I don't want to take up a lot of camera time with this because it's all going to be the same. I'm just outlining and filling in. I will do the same up here. That's not dry, so I'm not going to lay my hand across it, but I'm going to outline the letter and then just fill in those fat parts because it doesn't have very many fat parts, and then outline that and fill it in as well. So I'm going to go off camera and finish this part because it is very repetitive, it's very easy, and then I'll come back and show you how to do the drop shadow, and we'll figure out if we're going to do some aging on this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do a drop shadow on these, which is just a shadow off to one side or the other, and I'm doing it on the left side. So I'm going to come out away from the letter a little bit. Just want to separate here. Not sure what's going on with that. I painted them in with the marker, and then I didn't quite like how they turned out, so I went back over with my paint on several of the areas. I'm gonna fix that spot right there. There is the soda shop. And you know, if you wanted to, you could also come in here and add a second line in here, a thin line. Just go right beside this one. Need a little bit more paint in my brush. It's a little bit on the thin side. This step, this extra line here is optional. My pattern won't have it. Well, I may go in and add it to my pattern. I don't know. It's really completely up to you. I don't like the way this one is coming off of this one here. So the paint hasn't cured there, so I can remove it easily. And then touch this line back up. Looks better. And then I'll come up here and do this one. I'll have to go back over this one because I had way too much water in my brush here. Okay, and we're going to go along this inside edge here. Ooh, a little fat. Don't want it that fat. Take some of that off. Okay, now down here on these letters, let's go ahead and do them as well. Make everything match. These letters are going to be a little bit harder to do because they are way closer together. And my brush is separating there. I'm not really sure what's going on. And this A and this M are very close together. Oops. Okay. That looks pretty good. So that's how we do our lettering. Personally, I think painting it in is much easier, but again, I may do a stencil for this. I'm not sure. I don't think I could get the part there, but I will see what I can come up with. But for now, Just paint them in by hand. Okay, so now I want to take a step back from it and look and see. I know I want to do something to the edges. I'm just not quite sure exactly what that's going to be, so I'll be right back. Alright, a couple more things I think I want to do before we finish this project up. And one of them is to maybe put a little bit of blue down in here, because we've got blue up here and I want to carry it down a little bit. So I've got my Royal Navy out here, and it's a very bright color. So I just get a teeny tiny, you probably can't even see it, it's so tiny, tiny little dot of blue paint on my brush and a little bit of baby blue. And I'm going to work those into my brush till it's, with the water that's in my brush, till it's like this really sheer blue color. I want this to be very light, almost, it's going to be transparent because it's just a wash. So we're basically just kind of tinting water here. But I want to put some of this on the left side. This is extremely sheer, so I would play around with it just a little bit and before I apply it to make sure. But if you apply it, just take some water, and it's too dark, just take some water real quickly and remove it. But we just want a little tint of that in here. A little bit of blue. This is going to be on the left side, okay? Left side of the rim, left side of the glass, left side of the base here. Okay, and I didn't think about it too much, I just put some on there. Alright, that looks pretty good there. I like that. Alright, let me wide angle back out, because I think the last thing that I want to do, and I did add extra line in here. You don't have to add that. I can't remember if I said that on the video or not already. But the last thing I want to do is I want to kind of age or rough up the edges. And I'm just going to do that with some paint. So I'm going to grab a little bit bigger round brush. And we're going to use some black paint here. So I'm going to load my brush up with some black paint. And I'm going to be on the edge here, and I'm just going to scoot it and push it back and forth to create like worn edge on the sign here. And I just keep kind of rocking it back and forth. Make them all different sizes. I'm going to come up here and make a couple a little bit bigger. And probably bigger here on this edge. And then we're going to go down the sides and do the same thing. And maybe make a couple of these a little bit bigger. A little bit bigger cracks in the edge. And then we'll come and do the bottom. You don't have to have this, some of this everywhere, but you do want to create the look of like torn stuff. And this one last edge here. Just kind of wiggle it and smush it and let it come up on the edge and scoot down the edge, and it's a pretty easy little process to do to kind of age and crack up sign here. So I'm going to make a few bigger ones at the top here. I feel like we need some bigger stuff going on up here. Okay, and then just take a look at it and see if you need to adjust anything anywhere. I'm thinking that looks pretty good. I like the way that looks. And then we can dirty up those edges a little bit by taking some of our milk chocolate. I think that might be a little light. Add a little bit of the Royal Navy to it to give it a tiny bit of a green tinge to it. And then we can come in here and put some of this around some of these bigger cracks. Definitely give it a more aged look here. I'll stay off my lettering there. I'm just doing a little float around this black. I'll mix up a little bit more here on my brush. That was the milk chocolate and a little tiny bit of Royal Navy. And I actually might just put some of this along the edge, especially on those bright white areas. We don't want those bright white areas on the edge. Milk chocolate, Royal Navy. Oops. My brush turned around the wrong way there. A little water. I'm thinking I might take some of this and put some in some random places on here. Dirty it up just a little bit. Don't want it to look so... And we're just doing a wash, so make sure you've got water in your brush so you can kind of move that around and put it where you think it will look the best. Around. You don't have to do this at all on yours. If you like keeping yours a little bit more clean and fresh, then you can do that. I'm just going to put a little bit in the background. Really kind of age it up and dirty it up. And put some down here around these letters, I think. and just make it look a little bit more dirty. I think I need just a touch more. A couple places need to be just a little bit darker. And I think we're going to be done with this one. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good. I like that little bit of aging on the background there. I think that looks pretty good. And I think I'm gonna leave it right there. I mean, there's much more that you could do to it to age it more. You could add some Vintage Effects wash and wash that over it. Lots that you can do to it. I really didn't want the ice cream to look as worn as the edges of the frame. So I think that's the edges of the sign. So I think I'm going to leave it right there at that. I think it turned out beautiful. I love this one. It was super fun for me to paint. Let me wide angle out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. Great, great project. It's always fun to paint something different, and this was out of my box as normal, out of my normal painting style, so I'm loving this one. I think it's great. Thank you so much for painting with me, everybody. I hope that you enjoyed this one. If you are watching on my YouTube channel, please give me a thumbs up. Like, share, subscribe, comment. I appreciate every one of you, and I will see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye, everybody.